I set that extra table up on the table saw. I've got a power feeder. I'm gonna mount that on that auxiliary table. But once I got to looking at it, got the feeder out, it is heavy, and it's too heavy for that particle board table. So I'm just gonna have to feed these by hand. Well, then we went to town and I got a new blade. I got a rip blade, and it doesn't make as pretty of a cut as what that other blade did, but it cuts a lot faster. But this will be fine for what I need. Some of this stuff for the floor, of course, you'll never see the edge as long as it's a nice, clean, uniform edge. And the ones that are going on the ceiling are going to go through the shaper anyway to have the tongue and groove cut on them. So my wife bought a couple of sheets of 1/8" plywood that she uses for her projects for rose mauling. I put a plywood blade on there for that, just a 7 1/4" plywood blade, and we broke that plywood down into strips for her to cut up further later for her rose mauling project. I think I've got everything set up here now. I'm going to go ahead and run all the rest of these practice pieces through there and get those jointed up, and then we'll start on the big pieces, see how far I can get those done before it gets dark. Losing a lot of daylight here lately. It's fall, definitely autumn here. Well, it's good to have pieces to practice on. That splitter was still sliding down, so I had to take the blade out, got in there with some vice grips and tightened that slot that it slides up and down in down. We'll see how that works now. Well, I'm still having trouble with that splitter, so I'm going to have to take it out of there and see what I can do about tightening that up so that it doesn't slide down on me all the time. Well, I think I figured out what was happening there. When that splitter was down all the way and you'd raise the saw blade up, motor mount would run into it, and it was causing that bracket that holds the splitter in there to bend out. Well, it kind of softened that metal up a little bit. I bent it back right into position and stuff, but I think what was going on is when those shorter pieces of wood would come through that, over the end of that table and drop down, they would kick up and hit the splitter, and they were bending that bracket that holds it in. So I don't have any more practice pieces to do, so I guess we'll give it a try with a regular sized board now. All right, that's working pretty good now. Well, I'll just keep doing that. I move the camera out of the way because it's right in the way where I'm stacking the wood at on the forks of the Bobcat. So I got to move the pickup out of the way too. I had it backed up here so we could get the sheets of plywood out for my wife and run those through the saw. Shuttle a few things around and have a little bite to eat, and then we'll work on this a little bit more. Well, all the 10-footers are done. That saw leaves a little more of a mark on it than what would have done with that other saw, but it cut a lot faster. If I wanted them perfect, I could always run them through the jointer one more time and just take a little bit off, but they're good enough for who they're for. And some of them just barely took a little bit off of them and trued them up a little bit. Some of them took 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 inch off, maybe a little more. So now they're all exactly the same width, squared up, and that edge is perfect. So those 10-footers are for the floor, and that's all I need to do with those other than cut them to length and put the finish on them and stuff. Then the 12-footers will go next. Some of those will be cut down into 10-footers for the floor deck. I've got 26 right now of the 10-footers. So I did pretty good. It bogged down a little bit on some of the cuts as I was pushing it through. I could definitely use more horsepower, a big more horsepower saw. But I've done that before with the radial arm saw, and with that many boards going through the radial arm saw, that motor would have heated up enough it would have kicked out the thermal overload on it, and it had to wait overnight to finish it up. Anyway, I think I'm done with those now for today. I think I'll finish the rest of them up tomorrow. I've got everything all set up and ready to go. Now it's just a matter of running that stuff through there. It does go easier running them through the saw because I'm just running them through one time. When I run it through the jointer, some of those I'd have to run through 4 or 5 times to get them down. Anyway, that's 25 of them done and one kicker, and they are beautiful. They're going to make a great floor deck. Alright, well, we had a little bit of a delay there. One of my friends came by. I haven't seen him for a while, visited for a while. I'll go ahead and get busy, get started at cutting up those 12-foot 2x6s. So I've got fresh earplugs put in. I got an N95 dust mask to wear. That yellow cedar dust is kind of irritating, and I'm putting out a lot of that fine sawdust there. And it makes a lot more sense to wear that for running a yellow cedar through the table saw than it does for COVID, that's for sure. I've got that table saw table polished up too good. That sun is really reflecting off it right into my eyes. I might have to go get my sunglasses on. Sun's shining right in there. Now, some of those were the ones that had the big bow in them that wound up taking a lot off on the jointer, and they're not going to clean up all the way on the one edge. I know a lot of the 14 footers were the same way, so I'll run them through like this and then see if I have to narrow them up a little bit more. And anyway, I'll keep working at this. Glasses are fogging up a little bit coming off this mask, and then that sunshine hitting that tabletop just got blind going into there. Anyway, we'll keep working on it. All right, that's all of the 12 footers. Got those stacked up over here on the Bobcat. Most of those turned out pretty good. There was one or two of them that are going to be a little narrow. They didn't touch the blade going through there. They were ones that the bow was so much on them that took a lot of it off when I was jointing them. And then there's a couple of them that had the bow on them that just showed up. I got it all cleaned up except for one end. So one end of them is going to be bent a little bit, not as thick or whatever. Anyway, those can be trimmed down into 10 footers. But some of those came out just perfect, just beautiful. So they'll make tongue and groove boards. So I've got 25 of the good 10-foot 2x4s, and I need 35. So I'll need about 10 of these to cut down to 10 footers. I said 2x4s, I meant 2x6s. So anyway, there's 25 good ones of the 10 footers. So there'll be 10 of these that I can cut down. I can cull out any of them that didn't quite edge up quite as good. And then, like I said before, some of these, they don't have to be perfect on the edges because they're going to be trimmed up again on for the tongue and groove on the shaper, and that'll clean up some of those edges that didn't quite get perfect. There he is. Wondering where Haji went. Well, I don't know what the horsepower of that saw is. Maybe 2 horse, 1 horse, something like that. Anyway, it's definitely used more horsepower for doing these 2-inch boards. A bigger, more horsepower table saw would definitely be an advantage for doing these 2-inch thick boards or thicker. That would be just perfect for doing 1-inch stuff. It's going through there all right, but I have to keep the feed rate down, and that's with the sharp blade and stuff. I just put some slickum on the table and on the blade, and to make it a lot easier to push through there. So that yellow cedar is kind of abrasive. Even though it feels really smooth, the sap in it and the wood fibers in it and stuff are kind of sticky, and they wear that stuff off pretty fast. So it gets kind of hard to push those through there after a while. And after putting the slickum on there, then I could outfeed that blade, outfeed that motor. Thinner boards, it would be just perfect. Most everything I've ever done has been on the radial arm saw, and that's one of those Craftsman 10-inch ones. I think those motors are rated at, I don't know, 1.5 horsepower or something, and Craftsman always overrates their stuff, but running through a bunch of boards like this, there's a good chance that I would have overheated the motor and had to wait for the thermal kick out to cool off enough to get it going again. This is actually doing pretty good. I'm pretty happy with the way it's working. Make a lot of sawdust though. I need to make a pellet mill, pelletizer or something to make pellets out of those sawdust, all that sawdust. I'll probably mix it with crankcase oil from the drainings of my engine oil and burn it in the wood stove. That's the last of the 14 footers. I had to do a little change up on that because of the bow they had in them. They didn't all get uniformly jointed. So I moved that fence back as far as I could, farther back, so I could get more of the board lined up with the fence before it went through the saw. And then because some of them, quite a few of them, didn't quite make a clean edge on them, not even clean enough to run through the tongue shaper blade, I cut the cut down to 5 1/4 inches from 5 1/2. So that was taking quite a bit off the good ones. There's 10 of them I'm going to have to run back through again. And then the other thing that I did is I started feeding them through until they came back here and rested on this rear roller, on this outfeed roller here on this end. But because that roller is not parallel with the table, then the boards they're so long and heavy that they start getting uncontrollable on the other end, the feed end of them, and it tips them on the table, but it starts pulling them away from the back end of them, away from the fence. So to correct for that, what I started doing is I run them through the table, through the saw until they come back here and rest on this outfeed roller, and then I'll come back out here and pull them through from this end where I can keep them tight against the fence on the other end. So we got 11 of them run through there at that narrower edge, so I'll run 9 more of the 14 footers through it, and then I'm going to run some of the 12 footers through there too. But I'll probably pick through the 12 footers and get the ones that didn't clean up properly on those when I run them through the first time. All of the 14 footers have been trimmed down to a nice uniform width, 5 1/4. They all got nice clean edges on them now. Now I'm going to go through the 12 footers and kind of pick through those and find the ones that don't have good clean edges on them yet and run those through there. So I want the 12 footers with nice clean edges on all 4 sides to stay the same, because those will be trimmed down to 10 footers for the floor, and then the ones that don't have didn't get trimmed all the way, and we'll run those through here again and make those so that they can go on the ceiling, so they'll go in the tongue and groove. And I got 75 pounds of sawdust out of those boards. Didn't expect quite that. Well, going through those 12-foot boards, not as many of them had rough cut left on them as I thought when I was initially doing them. I found the 2 or 3 that did and got those trimmed down. And the other ones that did is just on one end, and it's because the board is bowed there. Cutting those back to 10 footers is going to eliminate that. I took the 10 footers up by the house and got some of them set up on sawhorses, and Judy's up there now putting the stain on them. We're not going to be able to get them all done, but we got 2 or 3 more days of this good weather. Today's Sunday. It's supposed to start raining on Wednesday, so take advantage of this good weather while we can. Stack these boards back up in the hanger because we're not going to have time to get these stained. The 14 footers and the rest of the 12 footers that are trimmed up to 5 1/4 inches wide, those are going to go through the shaper. I could do that next. I could get the shaper set up and start running those through the shaper. But I've got the table saw set up now and I have to break it down, and I do want to do something with the table saw. I've got a whole bunch of flitches that have wane on both sides of them, and I need 16 1x12s, 3 or 4 feet long, to finish trimming out the front of the cabin. So I think what I may do is go pull out some of those and see if I can trim some 1x12s up to finish siding the cabin up there. You need to get new tar paper over that so the wind doesn't whistle through there, and then get it covered up, protected with some siding. That's what I'll do. And then I need some battens too. I was going to board and batten that, and then the top half of it will be shingled up underneath. Anyway, I might do that before I put the table saw away.